Hey guys, how's it going? This is the Power Gunner, and this is my review of Uncharted 3. I have played and reviewed the first and second game, so you can check those out too. As well as my Let's Plays of all three of the games if you want to check that out if you haven't seen them or any of them, whatever. But anyways, I will be reviewing Uncharted 3 here. The four main categories will be story, environment, gameplay, and fun. So, let's do this thingamadoodler bobber. So for this story in Uncharted 3, so the main story is that 20 years ago, when Nate met Sully, Nate basically stole the ring that you see him wearing in Uncharted 1 and 2, because he thought that he kind of had a destiny, and that is Sir Francis Drake's ring. He stole it from a museum, but also this lady named Marlowe, who Sully was working for at the time, wanted it too. And now, 20 years later, she's like caught up to him, pretty much, and there's this guy named Talbot, and they want it back because they think it will lead to the Atlantis of the Sands, which, it will. So, they are trying to find the Atlantis of the Sands in this game because it has immeasurable wealth. Something that is kind of interesting about the story and the characters in this game is they have a bit more character development of Nathan Drake than in the last few games. Characters are pretty much repeatedly asking him, why are you going after this treasure? It's just kind of stupid now, okay? Like, what are you trying to prove? And, yeah, I can kind of agree with that. Like, why? The past two treasures have been cursed. This one probably will be too. You probably won't get anything out of it except for just beating them to it. But Nathan Drake is very competitive when it comes to treasure hunting. So he's gonna find this thing first, or at least try to. Now, that said, the story sounds pretty awesome just from saying that, although it's not as awesome as you may think, and it's not as good as the story of Uncharted 2 or Uncharted 1, and that is because there are some major plot holes in this game, and things left unexplained, and things that just aren't as good as the second game and the first game, but pretty much the second game, because that one's awesome. Anyways, not saying that this game is bad, just the story was kind of bad in some parts. Like, for example, one of the bad guys is shot at a point, but then in the next scene you see him get up, and he's not shot at all, and he's fine. And you're like, how did he do that? He must have some sort of magical powers. This is going to be cool when they show what happens at the end. And then you never even figure out how that character survived, and that's just super disappointing, because it feels like you are going to, but you never find anything out really, and it's strange. And also in one part, another character is hinting towards Nathan about something that sounds really cool, kind of about his past and stuff, and kind of about who he is, and you think there's going to be some major plot twist, but then there's nothing. It's so anticlimactic, and it doesn't make sense why the character was even talking about that. So there are some pretty big plot holes in this game, and also it very closely follows the way this story's set out. It's very similar to the second game in some ways, and it's just kind of isn't that different from the second game. There's plot holes, not that it isn't enjoyable at all, it just isn't as good as the second game was. But the characters are still pretty awesome. I like that Nathan Drake has more character development in him, and Elena is back, and Sully. One thing that I like about this game is Sully's in almost every second of it. Well, kind of. And he's like the second most main character in this game, I guess I could say. Sully is in this one a lot, which I like because he was hardly in the second one. So Elena's in this. One thing that I didn't like though is that Chloe is in this one, but they hardly ever have anything with her other than she drives them around a bit and stuff. And she kind of helps them look for some treasures, but other than that, it's kind of just like she's a robot. She doesn't really have much character interaction with Nate like she did in the second game, and they barely even seem like friends or something. It's like, what? So, that's definitely a minus. Chloe plays nowhere near as big of a part as she did in the second game, which is something that I liked. She's a good character. And there is a new character named Charlie Cutter, who's kind of interesting, but also both Charlie and Chloe, like about halfway through the game, they're kind of just left behind and never seen again, so that was kind of disappointing. And I do think Charlie is a funny character for what he was in the game, although I still don't like how Chloe is barely in it, and you don't really feel like she's much of a big part of it. Anyways, this game looks awesome, even better than the second game, which, yeah, it looks pretty darn realistic, I'll say, pretty darn realistic, but it doesn't look 100% realistic. As I've said for my previous review of the second game, I don't think any game can really look 100% realistic. Maybe like 10 years in the future. I don't know, I haven't been in the future, man. Okay, it's pretty cool, just you have that Uncharted treasure hunt epic kind of feel, and story, it's good, but it does have some major problems. So for the environment, the ideas for the environment and places you go, they're pretty crazy. You go to like some sort of like abandoned shipyards, or on a plane flying in the air, you're in an endless desert, you're in a like jungle in France, and you're in this mansion that's burning down. There are some pretty interesting places you go: Syria, London, Cartagena. So there are a lot of cool places that you go, but one thing is not all these places really fit in with the story. I'm not gonna spoil why exactly, but the whole shipyard part doesn't really fit in with the story, and I kind of feel like it was just put in there so that they could have that one epic moment at the end of it, which I'll talk about later, which was really epic, but it really has nothing to do with the story in a way once you kind of get down to it, and it kind of feels like that part of the game doesn't have story in it almost. It's kind of strange. But anyways, the layout of the sort of maps is still pretty good, just like it was in the second game, and things are easy to get around and climb, and everything's a bit smoothed out, although gameplay is very similar, which gameplay is our next category. So as I've said, gameplay is pretty much the same, but it's a bit smoothed out. So first, with fighting and gunfights and stuff, well, first off, melee combat has even more of an emphasis now. I like, for the most part, what they've done with it. They've added some more like melee moves. One thing that's cool, he like smacks a guy, then he pulls the pin out of the grenade that's in the guy's pants, and like kicks him away, then the guy blows up. That was pretty cool. There's some other cool things, just like pulling guys off of ledges. He did that in the second game actually, but yeah, they've made melee combat better. Sometimes when he's just running past something and like you press square, then he like takes some like refrigerator door and slams it against the guy's face. Just little things like that are pretty awesome. So there's that. Melee's better. One thing that is kind of bad with it though is sometimes it locks you into melee combat and you can't get out while you're being shot, so then you just die. Also with the shooting, it has been made a bit smoother. There are more weapons, which is a good thing, and you can now throw back grenades, which is pretty good, except for you can't always do it, so it's slightly confusing. But the shooting has been smoothed out a lot, and that is a good thing for multiplayer, which I will get into talking about a bit later in the review. So puzzles. Puzzles is pretty much the same as how it was in the second game. Some of them are on much bigger scales, and they're really fun to do, and most of them require parkour in them. And as for parkour, it's pretty much exactly like it is in the second game. This game, how the gameplay goes, it's almost exactly like the second game, but that's not a bad thing, because the gameplay in the second game was very good. They've just smoothed it over a bit, which I think it's good. The gameplay is good. I don't think it's too similar in a bad way, like a Call of Duty sort of way, but they've done good things with it. The feel of the gameplay is just good. The epic moments. There are some moments that are so epic. Like, for example, this actually does happen kind of later on in the game, so if it wasn't in the trailers, then I wouldn't be talking about this. But there is one scene where you are on a plane, and you totally, like, wreck the plane. You shoot out of it, and you survive. You're, like, the only survivor of the plane crash. And it is the most epic thing I've played in gaming. Although some of these epic moments I think were thought of, and then they thought of the story later of like, okay, well, let's make a story so that these epic moments could happen in it. You know, let's make those possible. So, although the moments are epic, they're fun, the story doesn't always really fit in with them, and that's part of my problem with the story. Like, for example, actually, I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say it's awesome and it has to do with water. That part was epic. And there are moments when you're like running from spiders. It's pretty cool. One moment when you are in a fiery mansion and it is absolutely beautiful. That's something I kind of didn't talk about in environment, is all of the environments are absolutely beautiful in this game. And that Fiery Mansion part, oh my gosh, it's extremely epic and extremely beautiful. They've done some great things with epic moments, although they don't really fit in with the story. Okay, so yeah, now we're moving on to fun. So for fun, I think that Uncharted 3 is fun, but I was kind of disappointed in this story and in some things in the game. But either way, it's still a good game, it's still a fun game, not as good as Uncharted 2. And there is also a multiplayer just like there was in Uncharted 2, and it's actually really good. I haven't played that much of it, but from what I have played, it was really fun. And the final score for Uncharted 3 is an 8.7 out of 10, which technically that's better than the first game, which I do think it is better than the first game, just because the first game, some things weren't quite as polished yet, although it was a good game. Not as good as the second game in my opinion. And yeah, so that's what I think of Uncharted 3. Here's my list of top 5 games of all time. I think that Uncharted 3 should be on it, but I actually haven't made the listing and checked yet, so if it isn't, well, that's kind of weird. And it would be like right after Infamous, the first game. Anyways, so yeah, this game's fun, not as good as the second one, still a fun game. I recommend it, but I'm not sure if you should necessarily buy a PlayStation 3 for it. So, thank you for watching my review of Uncharted 3. You can check out my other reviews if you want, and Let's Plays and series and everything. And, bye guys. Thanks for watching.